Did you know that over 60% of potential immigrants to Australia could now be instantly disqualified under new rules? And that's not even the most shocking part. In September 2025, Australia has taken a sharp turn, one that's raising eyebrows around the world. Under a controversial new plan pushed by Retailleau, immigrants are facing sudden, sweeping bans that were quietly rolled out, without warning. From stripping access to healthcare to banning certain job sectors and even monitoring your social media for un-Australian behavior, this isn't just about immigration anymore. It's about control. So what's really going on? Why are families being torn apart, workers being silenced, and skilled migrants being pushed away? In this video, we're revealing the 10 most shocking bans you need to know, and number 7 will truly leave you speechless. Stick around because what's happening now could change Australia forever. Number 10. Automatic visa cancellation for social media violations. Imagine waking up to find your visa cancelled, not because you broke the law, but because of something you posted on social media. Under Retailleau's controversial immigration overhaul, temporary visa holders can now face immediate cancellation if their online activity is deemed anti-Australian or socially disruptive. What does that mean exactly? The truth is, no one knows for sure. The definitions are intentionally vague, and that's what makes this policy so alarming. Posts criticizing the government, expressing solidarity with protests, or even sharing memes deemed offensive to national values could now be enough to trigger deportation without appeal, and it doesn't stop there. Advanced AI tools are reportedly being used to monitor visa holders' digital footprints across platforms like Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and X, formerly Twitter. Critics argue that this is a direct attack on freedom of speech and a slippery slope toward authoritarian-style surveillance. Immigrants are being forced to self-censor, constantly second-guessing every comment, like, or share, just to stay in the country legally. One leaked document from within the Department of Home Affairs revealed that over 1,100 visa applications were denied or revoked in the last 30 days alone, solely based on online activity. Some of these included posts supporting climate change protests, indigenous rights rallies, and even satirical content. This policy not only violates basic human rights, it creates a chilling atmosphere of fear and control. While Australians still enjoy broad protections for free speech, immigrants are being held to a much harsher, unspoken standard. So the question is, should freedom of expression stop at the border, or is this just the beginning of something much bigger? Because if your visa can be cancelled by a tweet, what's next? Number 9. Annual immigration cap, slashed by 60%. In a move that sent shockwaves through the global migrant community, Australia has slashed its annual immigration cap by a staggering 60%, dropping from 190,000 permanent visas per year to just 75,000. The government claims this drastic cut is meant to ease pressure on housing, jobs, and public services, but critics argue it's a thinly veiled attempt to close the doors on diversity and turn Australia into a fortress nation. The impact? Devastating. Skilled workers, students, and families now face years-long delays, with some applicants being told they may not receive a decision until 2030 or beyond. Entire sectors that rely heavily on migrant labor, like healthcare, IT, and education, are warning of an imminent workforce crisis. Hospitals are already understaffed, schools are struggling to hire, and regional towns that once depended on skilled migrants are now facing population decline. But it gets worse. This cap applies across all categories, meaning family reunification, humanitarian visas, and even employer-sponsored applications are all being squeezed into a shrinking funnel. It's not just a policy change, it's a message. We don't need you anymore. Economists are also raising the alarm. According to a recent report by the Australian Institute for Population Studies, this cap could cost the country billions in lost productivity over the next decade. Australia, like many Western nations, has an aging population. Cutting immigration now could mean fewer workers, slower innovation, and a long-term decline in economic growth. For many hopeful migrants, this cap feels like a door being slammed shut. Dreams are put on indefinite hold, families are kept apart, and Australia's image as a welcoming, multicultural nation is starting to crack. The question is, can the country afford to pay the price of isolation? Number 8. Citizenship denied for dual nationals from non-aligned nations. In one of the most controversial moves yet, Australia has introduced a new clause that bars dual nationals from non-aligned nations from gaining citizenship. A vague but powerful label that is already stirring international outrage. So what does non-aligned actually mean? According to insiders, it refers to countries that do not formally align with Western democratic alliances like NATO, AUKUS, or the Five Eyes intelligence network. That list includes major global powers such as China, Russia, Iran, and even some African and Southeast Asian countries. The new rule means that even if you've lived in Australia for years, paid taxes, contributed to the economy, and built a life, you could still be denied citizenship simply because of where you were born or which passport you hold. This policy not only undermines individual merit, it weaponizes geopolitics against innocent people seeking a better life. For thousands of migrants, many of whom fled political turmoil in their home countries, this feels like a betrayal. Imagine escaping censorship, conflict, or economic instability, only to be told, sorry, your country isn't aligned with ours, you're not welcome here permanently. Legal experts say this policy raises serious human rights concerns, especially since it targets people based on nationality, not behavior. It's a form of collective punishment disguised as national security. And while the government claims this move is about protecting Australian values and reducing foreign influence, critics see it as a dangerous step toward xenophobia, where citizenship is no longer earned but politically filtered. Thousands of applications are now on hold, and more rejections are expected in the coming months. Families are left in limbo, careers are stalled, and Australia's global reputation as a fair ace, and just democracy is on the line. So the real question is, when did your passport become a political liability? Number 7. Zero welfare access for temporary visa holders. In a move critics are calling economic exclusion by design, the new immigration policy under Retailleau's plan has completely cut off temporary visa holders from all forms of government welfare. That includes unemployment benefits, rental assistance, childcare subsidies, and even emergency financial relief. This means that if you're a student, skilled worker, or partner visa holder, and you lose your job or fall on hard times, you're on your own, no safety net, no support, no second chances. Supporters of the policy argue it's about ensuring that newcomers are self-reliant and not a burden on the system, but in reality, it creates a two-tier society where one group of people enjoys full protections, while the other lives in constant financial fear. The consequences are chilling. Many migrants desperate to stay afloat are forced to accept exploitative jobs, often with long hours, poor conditions, and under-the-table pay. In industries like hospitality, cleaning, and agriculture, reports of wage theft and abuse are already skyrocketing. The Australian Council of Social Service warns that this policy could push tens of thousands of migrants below the poverty line, increasing homelessness, food insecurity, and mental health issues, especially among international students and low-wage workers. And here's the kicker. Many of these visa holders pay taxes just like citizens. They contribute to the economy, yet are denied the very support systems their taxes help fund. Human rights groups are calling it a violation of basic dignity, punishing people not for what they've done, but for what visa they hold. And in a country that prides itself on fairness and a fair go for all, this policy feels deeply out of step. The bigger question is, how long can a country thrive when it abandons the very people helping to build it? Number 6. Mandatory cultural integration course with ideological testing. At first glance, a cultural integration course might sound like a helpful introduction to Australian life, covering local customs, laws, and societal values. But under Retailleau's new immigration policy, it's become something far more controversial, a gatekeeping tool loaded with ideological testing. All new immigrants are now required to complete the course before receiving full visa approval. But it's not just about learning the road rules or Aussie slang. Participants are now being graded on their alignment with so-called core Australian values. These include views on LGBTQ+ rights, Western democratic ideals, gender equality, and political loyalty to Australian institutions. What's raising alarm is that failure to pass the course, or refusing to answer certain questions, can result in visa denial or cancellation, with no clear appeals process. In some leaked sample questions, immigrants are asked things like, do you believe Australian values are superior to those of your home country? Would you report a friend who criticized the Australian government online? Critics argue this veers dangerously close to ideological profiling, turning immigration into a loyalty test. It punishes cultural differences and pressures migrants to adopt specific political and social views, or risk being excluded. For many, this course feels like a thinly veiled attempt at forced assimilation, not integration. Instead of building bridges, it draws lines in the sand. Human rights organizations and legal experts warn that this approach could violate freedom of thought and belief, both of which are protected under international law. And for communities coming from more conservative or traditional societies, it creates a stressful, alienating experience. So here's the hard truth. When integration becomes a test of ideology, is it really about unity or control? Number 5. No permanent residency path for gig workers. Under the new immigration plan, one of the most quietly devastating changes is the complete removal of permanent residency pathways for gig economy workers. That's right. If you drive for Uber, deliver for DoorDash, work freelance, or rely on any app-based or contract platform to earn a living, you are now automatically disqualified from applying for permanent residency in Australia. The reasoning? Officials claim gig jobs don't offer enough economic stability or national contribution. But here's the contradiction. Australia's gig economy is booming, and many of these workers are essential to the daily functioning of major cities. From food delivery and rideshare services to freelance digital work, gig workers keep the wheels turning. Yet they're now being told, you're good enough to work here, but not good enough to stay. This change hits particularly hard for international students and skilled migrants, who often turn to gig work as a flexible way to support themselves while studying or transitioning careers. These workers pay taxes, follow the rules, and build lives here. But under the new system, no matter how long they stay or how hard they work, their contributions are seen as lesser than those of salaried employees. Legal experts argue that this policy creates a subclass of workers, people allowed to live and labor in Australia, but permanently locked out of the security and rights that come with residency. For many, it's a crushing blow. Dreams of citizenship are instantly dead-ended, and the message is clear. If you don't fit the government's narrow definition of a productive migrant, you're disposable. So the question remains, can a modern country thrive by excluding the very people powering its cities simply because their job isn't on a payroll? Number 4. Work limitation to specific sectors only. In what many are calling a modern form of labor control, the new immigration policy has placed a strict limit on where new migrants are allowed to work. Under the revised rules, temporary and some permanent visa holders are now restricted to jobs in national priority sectors, including agriculture, aged care, construction, and mining. At first glance, it may seem like a strategy to fill urgent labor gaps, but scratch beneath the surface, and the implications are far more troubling. This policy effectively forces highly qualified individuals into roles that may have nothing to do with their experience, education, or aspirations, just to maintain visa compliance. Imagine being a trained software engineer, a nurse, or an entrepreneur, only to be told that the only legal jobs available to you are fruit picking in regional farms or construction site labor. For many skilled migrants, it's not just a career detour, it's a professional dead end. The policy has sparked outrage across academic, tech, and business sectors. Startups and employers warn they are losing access to global talent, as skilled professionals either look elsewhere or are underutilized in mismatched roles. What's worse, migrants who refuse or are unable to take jobs in these sectors risk visa cancellation even if they have valid job offers in other industries. It's a policy that doesn't just limit opportunity, it strips individuals of agency over their own futures. Human rights advocates argue that this kind of sector-based restriction borders on labor coercion, especially when the alternative is deportation. It creates a vulnerable workforce, trapped, silenced, and disposable. The big question is, when governments start dictating not just who can come in, but exactly what they can do, how far are we from turning opportunity into exploitation? Number 3. Restricted access to family visas. One of the most heartbreaking changes in Retailleau's immigration overhaul is the severe restriction placed on family visas. Under the new policy, partner, parent, and dependent visas are now only available to migrants deemed economically valuable, essentially turning family unity into a privilege for the wealthy or highly skilled. In practical terms, this means that unless you're earning well above the national median income, have a job in a high-demand sector, or meet strict asset thresholds, your chances of bringing over your spouse, children, or elderly parents have just dropped dramatically. For many immigrants, family isn't just emotional support, it's a survival system. Parents help raise children, spouses share financial burdens, and extended families provide the stability that helps newcomers thrive. But under these new rules, love, care, and connection have been reduced to numbers on a spreadsheet. Stories are already surfacing of couples forced to live continents apart, or elderly parents being denied visas despite poor health and no support systems in their home countries. The emotional toll is enormous. Loneliness, depression, and anxiety among migrants are all expected to rise, especially for those stuck in long-distance limbo, unsure when or if they'll ever reunite with their loved ones. The government argues it's about reducing dependency on public services, but critics say it's a deeply inhumane policy that punishes the most vulnerable, migrants who may work hard but don't fit into the elite productive class. Legal experts are also concerned about the policy's long-term effects, warning that denying family reunification could undermine social cohesion and create isolated migrant communities with little connection to Australian society. So here's the painful truth. When immigration becomes a solo journey, who's left to help carry the weight? Number 2. English proficiency requirement, raised to C1 level. In a move that's already shutting out thousands of potential migrants, the Australian government has quietly raised the English language proficiency requirement to a C1 level, a standard typically reserved for university graduates, academics, and native-like speakers. Previously, applicants needed a B1 or B2 level, enough to communicate, work, and integrate. But with the new requirement, migrants must now demonstrate near fluency, the kind of advanced command of English that allows for debating complex topics, writing professional reports, and understanding abstract ideas. The result? Over 60% of current visa applicants no longer qualify. It's not just students or low-skilled workers being turned away. Even engineers, doctors, and IT professionals, people with strong qualifications but slightly lower English test scores, are now being rejected, despite having job offers in Australia. This policy change is hitting hardest in non-English speaking regions like South Asia, Latin America, and parts of Africa. For many, reaching C1 level requires years of expensive language training, often in countries where English isn't widely spoken in daily life. And here's the catch. The testing process is rigid, costly, and unforgiving. One poor test day can ruin someone's chances, regardless of their professional value or real-world communication skills. Supporters of the policy argue it ensures better integration and reduces reliance on interpreters, but critics say it's a thinly veiled strategy to block migration from less wealthy, non-Western countries, favoring applicants from English-speaking backgrounds regardless of skill or intent. For many aspiring migrants, this new requirement doesn't just test language, it tests access to privilege, time, and financial resources. It sends a clear message: if you can't speak like a native, don't bother applying. So we have to ask, is language being used as a tool for integration or a weapon of exclusion? Number 1. No access to public health care for 3 years. Perhaps the most dangerous and immediate change in Retailleau's immigration plan is the introduction of a 3-year waiting period for public health care. Under this policy, new migrants will be completely excluded from Medicare, Australia's universal healthcare system, for their first 36 months in the country. That means no access to subsidized doctor visits, hospital care, prescription medications, mental health services, or even emergency treatment without paying out of pocket. And in a country where a single night in the hospital can cost thousands of dollars, this policy could be financially catastrophic. The government claims the move will protect the system from overuse and save taxpayer money. But public health experts warn it does the exact opposite. By pushing new migrants to delay or avoid treatment, the policy increases the risk of undiagnosed illnesses, public health outbreaks, and long-term medical costs. For families arriving with children or elderly relatives, this policy is especially cruel. What happens when a child gets sick? When a pregnant woman needs prenatal care? When a diabetic runs out of insulin? The answer is simple and terrifying: either pay thousands or go without care. This isn't just about access, it's about equity. Migrants, even new arrivals, pay taxes from day one. They contribute to the same system they're now being excluded from. And for many, private insurance simply isn't affordable or comprehensive enough to cover real emergencies. Critics argue that this policy turns healthcare into a luxury, reserved for those with privilege, not those in need. It undermines the very idea of universal care and sends a harsh message to newcomers: you're on your own. So the final question is this: when a country denies basic healthcare to those building its future, what kind of future is it really building? What we're witnessing in Australia right now isn't just a shift in immigration policy, it's a complete transformation of who gets to belong and on what terms. From denying healthcare, to monitoring your social media, to breaking families apart and limiting your right to work freely, these 10 bans signal something much deeper than policy reform. They reflect a vision of Australia where only the economically elite, ideologically aligned, and politically convenient are welcomed. These rules don't just impact future migrants, they change the experience of those already living and contributing here. Skilled professionals are being boxed into blue-collar roles. Students are stuck in legal limbo. Gig workers, the backbone of modern cities, are being treated as second class, and families are being forced to choose between their loved ones and their future. Supporters say it's about protecting Australia's national interests, but critics ask, at what cost? Because when immigration stops being about opportunity and starts being about control, everyone loses, not just migrants, but the nation itself. Innovation stalls, diversity shrinks, compassion fades. So the question we all need to ask is, what kind of Australia do we want to build? One that opens doors, or one that quietly closes them behind high walls?